I'm really excited to be here. It's been an incredible journey the last 9 months for me at Airtel. So what I wanted to do is take the next 10 or 12 minutes and just talk through three things. So I've been at Airtel since April of this year, and so wanted to talk about our sort of journey so far and story so far this year, and some of the things that we've been really excited about. And then, since there are so many mobile entrepreneurs here, I wanted to also sort of share our view in terms of taking stock of where we're headed in the future. Whenever I sit in an audience like this, I've been an entrepreneur before, and I hate people who come from big companies and give some sort of general gyan about what people should be starting and where they should be going and stuff like that. So I've tried really hard to not tell you guys what you should be doing, but I do have 2 or 3 thoughts about, as a mobile entrepreneur, how you should probably spend your time building something big and interesting. And so I wanted to leave that with you guys. That makes sense? Yeah. So I joined Airtel in April, and one of the things that we do at Airtel is do this thing called market visits, which is essentially on Thursdays and Fridays or some combination. You get out of your office, right? In fact, in some teams, if you're in the office on a Thursday, you're not doing your job, right? You're supposed to go somewhere out in the market and talk to users. And so I started, tweeting about all these trips that I went on across the length and breadth of India. And not having worked in India for over 10 years, it was just phenomenal to travel through the country and meet people like this guy, right? I have this user's photo because we met him somewhere in, I think in Chandigarh, and so he was basically a huge data user, and he was running this retail store. And essentially what we discovered about him is he's one of a few retail outlet store guys who have a big data plan, and they use it to download movies at night, right? So that's what they're doing with their plan. And they burn it on an SD card, and they use that in their retail stores to sell these SD cards with new movies, right? And so here is an example of a guy innovating with mobile data. And every time I think about where India is headed, rightly or wrongly, faces like this come to my mind. And so in some sense, it's fantastic to see how all this growth of mobile data in India is impacting people like him, because at the point where all the innovation that we're building touches people like this guy's lives, I think that's when we're creating real impact, right? So I always think back to my first 1 month, which I wish I could go back and have, a month or so of traveling through the country. But it was a phenomenal experience, and in some sense it grounds and guides a lot of what we do even today at Airtel. So one of the things that we did this year that I'm really excited about is when someone upgrades from a feature phone, right now they go from a feature phone to another feature phone, right? And the idea of a fully featured smartphone under $100, I think is breaking a big barrier in India, because at that point, and starting at that point, a feature phone user can upgrade to a real true smartphone and start to experience all the incredible things that you guys are building over that platform. So this was actually a photo that Sundar's team sent to us from the Android One launch. And so we solved for 2 problems with Android One. One is trying to make sure the operating system is always the latest operating system, because that's a huge problem with Android. And so as a developer, you're now supporting multiple versions of Android. And so the problem we wanted to solve is if the latest version of Android is always on the phone, then the number of versions that you test for and build for is a lot less. And the other thing we did is we wanted to make sure the apps were always the latest version of the app, so that people weren't stopping data upgrades and app upgrades, and therefore using previous versions of the app. So in my mind, this was a huge step forward as we talk about the journey. And now we're also seeing 4G smartphones at about $150, right? And this is only going to come down as we go forward. And by doing these 2 things, we now have about 35 million or so smartphones on the Airtel network, and probably about 3 times that number if you think about the smartphone size in India. So the thought is, what would you build for about 35 million smartphones as people get into it for the first time? And one of the things we actually find is when a user goes from a feature phone to a smartphone, on average, their data consumption goes up about 3 to 5x with no other interventions, right? Of course, with other interventions, it could go up even further, but with zero intervention, it could actually go up to 3 to 5x, right? So this is actually a huge role that we see ourselves doing, which is this one of an enabler. And it's, we don't know what services are going to build that are going to be incredible, but we want to enable all of them to come and play and succeed. The other thing that I'm actually really excited by is when I got back to the office after about 2-3 weeks of traveling quite a bit, one of the things I realized is we didn't have a set of tenets within Airtel to guide all of our product development, right? So we actually sat and wrote down, and this was actually a phenomenally fun journey for me to go through. And my favorite is actually the focus on the user, where someone told me this a few years ago, is pick the painkillers rather than the vitamins, right? I always think about that when you solve for a big product problem, is if you think about what medicines people take every day, they always forget their vitamins, but they don't forget their painkillers, right? So hopefully the problem that you're solving is so big for the user that it's something they have to take every day. And so they treat it more like a painkiller and less like a vitamin, right? So we actually wrote down these principles, and they guide a lot of our product development. Because if you think about telcos in general, we've never had a product like Wink, not just in India, launched by an operator, but probably in any other country, because telcos don't subject themselves to the same rigor of product development and product quality that a Facebook or a Google or a Flipkart would subject themselves to, from an app development perspective. And so we actually wanted to exercise that muscle because that's extremely important for category creation in India. And so we came up with this. We go and refer back to this every so often. This led to our first real product, which we launched in September. And it's been quite an incredible journey. We've crossed about over 2 million downloads in about 3 months, and it's going extremely strong. As you guys saw, we broke a TV commercial today, which we're confident about because the product actually works. And what's interesting about about this launch to me is, the telco can actually become an underdog, right? How often do you take the top telco in the country and have them actually be the number 3 competitor in a space, and they have to fight to earn, their place against much bigger, much more established companies? And the picture on the right is something I'm really, really excited about, right? What we wanted to do is not just build a product that is as good as everybody else, but it is so superior in terms of very, very simple things that we get user feedback like the one on the right. And so that's something that we were shooting for right before launch. We sent out a survey. So one of the things we do is before launching any product, we actually have our employees use it. Again, this is extremely popular in companies like Yahoo and Google and stuff, but we started that at Airtel this year. We actually sent a survey to our employees, and the question was not, do you like Wink? The question was, do you like it so much that you'll delete every other music app on your phone, right? So we wanted users to love the product so much, and every time we hear a user feedback or an app store feedback like this, it always makes us extremely happy. And this is what we disrupted, right? If you look at the products that were there in the business, there were tons of ads, there were tons of interruptions in the experience. And if you're enjoying music, you don't want it to be interrupted with an ad, right? And if you think of data consumption, the less these interruptions, the more the experience is pure, the more you end up consuming content. So this has led to a lot of user love. About 1 or 2 weeks ago, Airtel as well as Wink won the best products of the year. The awards by themselves matter a whole lot less to us. And what matters more is that this was all voted by users. The feedback cycle of when you love what you do, users show that love back to you guys. The other initiative that I'm really interested about, which impacts a lot of the developers here, is bringing new users to the internet, right? In India, because of cultural sensitivities or fear or bill shock or whatever the constraints are, not a lot of people, come into the internet on a regular basis, but they could. In fact, on the Airtel network, only 50% of data-capable phones actually use data, right? So that's extremely low-hanging fruit. And so the picture on the right is one of my favorite pictures. It's basically Airtel people bringing some new users online on the Dal Lake in Kashmir, about a week or two after the major natural disaster in Jammu and Kashmir. And so one of the things Airtel is extremely committed to through the one-touch internet product that we launched a few weeks ago, probably 6 weeks or so ago, is bringing new users online, which obviously helps the entire ecosystem from consumption perspective. The other thing we're really interested about is where the screens come together, right? Today, if I walk into my house, I want my mobile phone and my TV screen and my music system and my speakers to all work together. And so we saw that being a company with a broadband business, a DTH business, and a mobile business, we could do a whole lot to bring these screens together. And so we've launched an exclusive with Google around Chromecast a couple of weeks ago. And we think that it's going to be start of a huge set of use cases where I just start from one form factor, I go into another, and I come back to the first where I began. So if I sort of take stock, right, think about 4G handsets under 10,000, and what I keep hearing is that that'll come down to a $100 number in like 3 months or 3 to 6 months. So this is one of my favorite quotes that one of my colleagues uses a lot, which is no battle plan survives first contact with the enemy, right? So about 3 months ago, even 2 months ago, our view was 4G is going to be really a home broadband replacement, given where phones and the cost of 4G phones were at. Today, I couldn't be more excited that I think it's going to be a mobile-driven revolution in 4G. And truly in 4G, supply is the constraint, not demand, right? So the quicker operators can go build out 4G, the more use cases there's going to be and the more adoption there's going to be. I don't think it's going to be limited by the demand. I think it's going to be limited by supply. And then the second big trend that we see is, even though the data business at Airtel has been growing quite well, it's still only less than 20% or so of the revenue. I think the last quarter it was about 14.5% of revenue. And so there's an incredible opportunity to grow the data business. And with that, a lot of the content and app development companies. And one of the themes that we've been using is it's use cases, not gigabytes, that's going to drive adoption of data. And that means we're looking forward to working with a lot of you guys to convert gigabytes to use cases, so that's what people are consuming. And then the network is getting smarter, right? So in a lot of our bigger cities, think about Bangalore outside Royal Orchid at 6 a.m. versus at 10 a.m., right? There's tons of cars, there's tons of traffic, and everyone's on their phones. And so we're trying to solve for those problems around self-organizing networks, etc. And we're also trying to solve through the spectrum constraints and the cost constraints and the rollout, etc., which itself is a whole subject. But essentially, that's a problem that we are committed to solving through investments, through rollouts, etc., etc. So you'll be seeing a phenomenal amount of investment particularly on 4G. So as you think of these three things, right, the handsets are becoming more and more accessible and incredibly easy to adopt. The data growth is happening, and as the networks get smarter. So as you think of what's ahead from our perspective, one is we feel like as users come online, they'll adopt more and more and more use cases. So this is actually an event that we put together to take 10 or 20 of the country's biggest developers, and we wanted to just see if that concept would work, to come in and actually see how their apps behaved on our network, right? So our network team actually did a simulation of how their app would impact the network before and after some changes, right? And most of the app developers who came by were completely blown away at seeing how by simply bunching up a bunch of APIs and not calling the network as frequently, they could often speed up the app about 20 or 30% at a minimum. This is without any kind of rocket science thinking. So we started that again early this year, and we look forward to doing a lot more in that area. Again, we wanted to solidify our own thinking before we expose that more broadly. We're really looking forward to exposing that to any developer who'd like to make their app work better with the network. The other thing I'm really excited about is, again, exercising a product muscle. So for those of you who go to airtel.in, we actually cut the load time from about 13.8 seconds to about 1.8 seconds. And so this is, again, how an internet company would think. But as you consume 4G, as you consume broadband, and as you use online to consume a lot of these services, you'll see some extremely easy to consume services from Airtel that is a layer on top of the network. And that way you can understand what you're doing a whole lot better, et cetera, et cetera. And then the other thing that's extremely close to my heart is my sense is over the next 12 months, payments and money transfer will be as simple as making a phone call. So we're extremely committed to doing a lot in that area, and you'll see a lot more from Airtel in that world. The final thought that I wanted to leave you with is, I know there are a lot of folks here who are starting companies, and so I just wanted to leave three things for you guys. The first is, I really think ultimately when we talk to entrepreneurs, for instance, and we think of what we can do to help them, what we wonder is, why is this problem so important for users, right? So I would say, unless you're really excited and you're really convinced about what you're building, it's going to be very hard to go convince folks like Airtel, folks like your users. So I would say, pick a problem that is worthy of your life, right? If you're going to spend 2, 3, 5 years building this product out, just pick something that you're going to get really jazzed about building, regardless of whether it's a hot space or not a hot space, because your product could actually make something into a hot space. And so I would just say, focus more than you would normally do on whether it's worthy of your time, worthy of your life, more than anything. The second is, this is one of my favorite stories, is there was this company in Chicago that was a washing powder company, and they were one of the country's top washing powder sales entities. And at some point, they saw this new innovation where you could chew it in your mouth and it wouldn't dissolve, and it was called chewing gum, right? And so they gave chewing gum free with the washing powder to a lot of their users. And so people started actually purchasing washing powder because it came free with chewing gum, right? And at some point, some really smart guy said, I think we're really a chewing gum company and not a washing powder company, right? And that, in fact, is a story of the birth of Wrigley's chewing gum company, which actually was a washing powder company before they became a gum company, right? So I always think of that story in terms of keeping your eyes and ears open, because your users are telling you a lot. So whether it's analytics, whether it's qualitative feedback, whether it's user studies, etc., there's a huge value to just keeping your eyes and ears open, because it might change your company just like it changed Wrigley's chewing gum company, right? And then the other thing that I think about a lot, which I think is extremely important as you're building a company, is never forgetting why for both yourself and your users. And I mean that from two perspectives, right? One is this painkillers, not vitamins piece, and you're hopefully solving a problem that is such a burning problem for the user that it's absolutely worth solving, and users will actually change their behavior a little or a lot to adopt your product. The other is, at Airtel, what we find is a lot of the times we have employees saying, why should I not go join some hot company that's being formed? Why should I continue to build a career at Airtel, right? And you're going to find your employees asking the same question. And usually it comes down to, I don't know if you guys have heard of this TED Talk by Daniel Pink, right? the three reasons that people really stay at any organization or any cause, it's either autonomy, mastery, or purpose, right? So I think as leaders, as founders of a lot of companies, you know, a lot of your roles are going to be around convincing people around a lot of these three areas, right? So whether, you know, your company is technically solving a problem so well that the best engineers in that space will now come and join your company because you're joining such a tough problem, and that's in the mastery category, right? And there are so many companies in India that are driving a purpose that is so much bigger than just making more money or and so on and so forth. And then the other reason why people leave to start companies is really the autonomy, right? So as you're building companies, hopefully you're continuing to keep the reason you went out and started a company in the first place, which is having a sense of autonomy, right? So those are the three thoughts that I wanted to leave. Again, I'm sticking to my promise of not telling companies what they should do, because I think you guys are close to the problem. You guys understand what problems to solve. But we're really, really excited about the entrepreneurship ecosystem in India. We're committed to doing a lot of the very fundamental enabling kinds of things to drive adoption and to drive data usage. And you know, a lot of times, you know, we're in these rooms with startups, and the one thing we want to do is we just want to stay humble, and we just want to learn from you guys, because honestly, other than building out a network and maybe one or two other things, we're not good at many other things. So we want to learn from the people who are actually very good at these things, and we're really excited to enable this ecosystem. So that's sort of what I had in mind, and thank you very much.